Everyone, I'd like to call to order our Special Education Advisory Committee meeting of Thursday, June 5th, 2025. I'm going to begin with the land acknowledgement. Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Squamish Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, live, and learn. I'd also like to read the Indigenous Rights and Human Rights Statement. The Durham District School Board recognizes that Indigenous rights are distinct. In the exercise of those rights, Indigenous staff and students shall not be subject to actions with the aim or effect of depriving these distinct rights. The Durham District School Board is committed to providing learning and working environments that center human rights and equity and are safe, welcoming, respectful, equitable, accessible, inclusive, and free from all forms of discrimination, oppression, harassment, and harm. I would move on then to our roll call. We have regrets tonight from Michelle Arsenault, trustee, Rowan Jarvis, Learning Disabilities Association of Durham Region, Charmaine Brown, Ontario Parents of Visually Impaired Children, Jessica Wells, member at large. I'd like to also welcome our guests today, Heather Mundy, Christine Thatcher, our trustee, and Jeff Raymond. And we'll move on to roll call. Tara Philly, Durham Down Syndrome Association.
Elizabeth Daniel, member at large.
Spencer Renee Burrell, Autism Ontario.
Donna Edwards, trustee for HS. Jen McLaughlin, Salwana Services.
Lisa Ray, Durham Secondary Administrators Association representative.
Allison Amber, Easter Seals, Ontario.
Shauna Haley, the Grandview Kids Family Advisory Committee.
Christine Thatcher, trustee.
Heather Mundy, Superintendent.
Jeff Raymer, Education Facilitator. Connor Johnson, System Lead for Inclusive Student Services.
Lisa Rye, Recording Secretary. Andrea McCauley, Superintendent of Education.
And Lauren West, Superintendent of Education.
Eva Kyriakides, Association for Bright Children, and SEAC Chair. We're moving on now to the approval of the agenda. Is anybody have any questions or concerns with the agenda as presented? Can we get a motion to approve the agenda? Since we're not, Tara Cullen, all in favor? Motion passed. Okay, moving on to the approval of the minutes from the May 1st, 2025 meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review those minutes? And do we have any comments or concerns with respect to those minutes? Okay, so none. Can I get a motion then to pass the minutes? Elizabeth Yang, seconders, Tara Cullen, all in favor? Okay, motion passed. Moving on then to the staff report.
Thank you. So I'll begin this evening and then pass it over to Connor. So as SEAC's aware in the agenda package, with the retirement of Superintendent Margaret Lazarus. So she retired on Friday and we co-led a meeting yesterday. So Margaret wanted to connect back with the principals and vice principals in her schools. So we did a transition yesterday. And as a result of that, we welcome Jackie Williams-Leacock to the senior team who takes the portfolio of anti-oppression as well as Ajax family of schools. And then Lauren and I are in transition where Lauren will be joining Inclusive Student Services, including lead support for SEAC. And I switch over to Innovative Technology and Leadership as of July 1st. So we just want to give Lauren a chance to be present and meet. We've talked about the depth of knowledge, compassion, and heart that sits around this table, and the important discussions that happen in forming programs and services for students and families in the district. And so it's with great admiration for SEAC that I introduce you to a tremendous colleague. Lauren and I have transitioned before in succession through a school, and you are getting a leader again of tremendous heart, inclusive practices, partner to families, and a really strong advocate for kids. So just wanted to start the department report, giving Lauren a chance to introduce herself to SEAC and those joining us at home.
Thanks for being here, or allowing me to be here this evening. Bring with me, I've been a superintendent of innovation, so worked alongside Jeff for a little bit here, but superintendent of innovation, system leadership after this time. And before that, for the last 2.5 years, I've been system lead with the board serving Whitby and Northern schools. So with that role brings a lot of experience around supporting students and working alongside closely with ISS, so that's been fantastic. And with that, I think this is year 21 as an administrator on the board. I think I've lost count at this point, but as Andrea said, we followed each other a few times within the role. So really looking forward to working alongside you and being this group together, and thank you for being here tonight. So thank you.
Thank you and welcome. So we just have a few updates between Connor and I to bring you from a department report, keeping it fairly tight, knowing that we have 2 important presentations this evening. So one was to just update SEAC, that the Inclusive Student Services Special Education Report did go forward to standing committee on Monday night. And we worked over the last couple of days to embed the feedback from trustees. The final revised draft goes to board in a couple weeks with requests to approve that. So once we post it to the board package, we'll circulate the link to SEAC so that you can see that as well. But the standing committee package is live. It's just with the feedback of trustees, including the 3 at the table this evening. We've made just a couple tweaks and revision to 3 sections, amplifying the language around addressing anti-ableism and challenges to the medical model of disability, as well as adding some additional language around the gifted programs and direction for next year, and clarity around number of classes and placements. So we thank the trustees for their feedback, and that will be forward. In terms of the budget process too, and I don't want to touch on that in case it's adjunct to the trustees report. We are at a point of working through the budget process with revenues presented and expenditures coming forward next week. And with that, I'll turn it over to Connor for the in-house department updates.
Thank you. So as you know, we always have our impact updates. We're on issue 9 right now, where we had a focus on professional learning and some of those commitments to inclusion and anti-oppression to kind of sum up some of those components that are part of it. We know as a department, we've engaged and we know the value of the fact that we need to be ongoing professionals. We always have to be learning as we are in spaces as well. We expect our students to learn and we expect ourselves to learn as well. So we've engaged in learning throughout the year and in many previous years, including central training for facilitators and clinician learning this year with sessions with Nicole Bonney and Faye Johnstone. Our clinical teams, as part of their ongoing practice, are always part of mentorship groups as well as in clinical supervision back and forth in terms of what they do. And our mentorship roles are also focused around the leads of various teams as well. So each of the teams, even our educator teams, they have mentorship groups that are part of weekly meetings, if not bi-weekly meetings. And they really focus on some of those ongoing topics, sometimes operational, but really about some of that ongoing learning as well. Sometimes they will also take a book to be able to go through. And in those groups, highlight that you'll know this from there is from our speech and language pathologists as well. Focus on this year where they really looked at sometimes when we think about augmented alternative communication and some of the platforms around that, it's often thought about, you know, the high tech, right? The device that's sitting in a student's hand doesn't always that. So it's starting sometimes with those low tech considerations and also with those mid tech considerations as well. And as a team, they really self-identified and said that they want to go really deep and understand a lot more with that. So that was one of their identified areas of learning, and they've just dive straight into it. It was also a great opportunity for us to bring some learning across the system and to see our staff and our teams involved in the IDEA conference. So again, handing big hand over to Grandview as well in the sense with our Children Treatment Center and partnering with Grandview School as well. It was a day where we saw CERTs and administrators from across DDSB as well as Grandview School come together and learning together. We had a keynote from John Draper and had an amazing session across there where people brought their learning, people brought their expertise into the space, and it was amazing for everybody to be able to have that hosted and to see what Grandview is actually able to offer in terms of a physical facility and just some of the thinking and learning around that as well. We also want to highlight our teachers of the students of the blind and low vision. They went to their first provincial conference in quite a long time. So this was actually pre-COVID was the last time that there was a provincial conference together. Where the teachers from across about 150 teachers met at the W. Ross McDonald School, and they engaged in 2 days of workshops, 2 days of keynotes. We actually had our lead of the team, Angela Stroud, participating as part of a panel of experts around the system and really looking, and the focus was on multilingual learners and how does that play into the learning and how teachers of blind and low vision are supporting students as well when you have those intersections of identity. We also want to say that we had our wonderful PLP movie day today. So this is our inclusive movie day. We had over 400 students down at Landmark Cinemas participating in multiple showings of Lilo and Stitch. I mean, it's a wonderful topical type of thing. So it was an inclusive movie that was happening as well. So again, over 400 students down at Landmark Cinemas today to be able to participate. And this was something that is, I can say it's not administrator led. It is something that is led by who are from the PLP program as well, who are part of that. And it's something that they've held near and dear. They were able to grow from approximately 150 students to about 400 this year. So that's a pretty monumental day for a lot of our students. Speaking about monumental days, we want to talk about over 2 days down at the Ability Center and a partnership with them in terms of our also being in the sport class. Down there was our abilities meet. We understand that the Civic Center at the Oshawa Civic area, that's currently under renovation. So they're doing some great things back facilities. So that means we had to think about something a little bit different. So thank you to our athletic committees, our DIA athletic committees in Gianwada, who was able to, with their team, come up with 2 incredible days for students. We had over 1,100 athletes in total over the 2 days, and we've had nothing but positive feedback about some of the considerations and how the space actually was and just how students love it. I mean, we always say, we come out and say it's the best day of the year, and the truth is now we can say it's the best 2 days of the year when we actually saw it. We had students who showed up with all the ribbons across their back. We had students that they've had from over the years. So like there's just those small little things that just really make it a show, again, the impact and what it means for families as well. We also, on the athletic theme, want to highlight the fact that I think they are, 6:50, they should be off the train by now. But we had our unified team going down to the Special Olympics competition in Ottawa for the last 2 days. They had some immersive, incredible experiences. And I can also say that they were had by athletes, coaches, and the leadership teams from J. Clark Richardson, who also went and presented on their project proposal called Include. But we're also happy to be able to say they're coming back with some hardware. Track and field won a total of 8 medals, basketball 1 silver, soccer 1 silver, and floor hockey is a 3-peat champion winning gold. So it's nice to be able to see this coming back. And then a little more serious note, but again, in terms of supportive structures for our students, as we know, core education funding was released earlier. And again, not to steal anything from, again, our trustee partners are going to be presented as well, but we do have responsive education programs. So those are the reps that are titled within it. They are programs that are bucketed funds around certain times, certain dates, and certain aspects that are looked for. So continuing for this year, we have our learning support for students with special education needs that was coming in at approximately $250,000 to be able to support that. And that usually sits directly in terms of staffing, as well as some of those resources and some of those supports that are directly there. We are continuing our partnership with the Ability Center for Therapeutic Rec over the summer as well. And there's also a responsive education program for summer mental health supports, and teams are currently working through the planning for those particular aspects around that as well. So, any questions at this point?
So just on the 2 rep funds, one is that we very easily expend the funds for summer learning for students with special education needs. So that puts an inclusive experience into our Great Beginnings for early kindergarten right through to senior level summer courses, providing both special education resource support, EA support, interpreter intervener support for students who directly need that accommodation. And so that fund is greatly appreciated and well used as it comes in. We're usually hot off the presses waiting for that. We continue to, based on feedback from our students and our families, experience a challenge fully expending the summer mental health fund. Our students give us feedback that when the school year closes, so would they like the services associated with the school board to also close, and our kids move into summer programs and access in different ways, and or with the removal of the social environment of school and academic pressure, they like to take a pause from mental health services. So we're looking at utilizing that rep fund, where it's got room around resourcing and really emphasizing one of the accountability and opportunities is around supporting transitions for return to school. And so we're focusing the dollars for summer mental health for students with special education needs on programs, including the therapeutic rec that Connor mentioned, and then leveraging both continuity of care for students that are seeking continuity of service for mental health, but also leveraging that ability to really focus our transition supports from the second mental health fund. So we do try and fully expend all of the dollars, but we do continue to give feedback to the Ministry of Education that summer mental health, those dollars from a feedback perspective of our students would be better utilized in year for additional staffing when our referral rates are quite high and the care load of our staff providing mental health supports is very significant. And our students very clearly indicate an optimal use of the board resources in year and want a positive summer, and the dollars sit just a little disjunct from that feedback from our students. So we try and leverage it as best as possible. It's nice that it leverages transition support, so we can move that kind of over and amplify the in-program supports for students.
Do we have, anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I would just say like, the All Abilities meet was wonderful. I went and saw it. I would love though, if there's a way to get more information about it on the website so that it's more accessible to people that aren't familiar with it. Like I wasn't earlier this year, and then I Google about it. There's not really anything that's easy to find or current about it. So it'd be really great to have that out there just to show how inclusive the board is being for students, for families, for other community members that are, you know, looking into that.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? No? Just a question on the last item, with respect to the funds for summer mental health and your feedback from the ministry. Would it be helpful if like SEAC was to write a letter to the ministry in support of that?
I appreciate that. I think the letter that you have circulated this evening, in terms of, so one of the challenges is the late delivery in the spring, and I appreciate that we were in an election cycle and that needs to circle through the different. So this year is an anomaly and put an asterisk to that. I really think that the advocacy for the summer versus in year is coming quite strongly through the mental health leads and the clinical leads back to the ministry, partnered with what you're already doing in terms of the earlier that core education funding is released, the better able the two leadership tables are in collaboration with each other, are better able to leverage on funds. When I think about students with special education needs and families and the logistical considerations that families engage in when school is closed for 2 months, it is challenging to put out program offers if funding doesn't come till May to plan to put out offers. Our families that we support collectively around this table are often making summer decisions back in January and February because they have to in order to ensure that their kids are safe and well and have summer joy. So the earlier we receive funding, the more malleable we are. It's the same with our staff that support summer learning programs. The earlier we're able to consolidate our summer jobs, the better able we are for staff to be in a position to support them. So I think the letter that you have circulated tonight around the timing of core education funding release to districts is a beautiful adjunct for this conversation.
Okay.
And that the mental health leads and the clinical leads are advocating in terms of in-year dollars versus 12-month dollars. But thank you. Up to SEAC and up at the
I
discretion of
was
SEAC,
just
but-
curious as to whether that was a,
Yeah.
you know, something that'd be valuable or something that should we circle back to, sort
I
of
think
closer to.
maybe monitor with Lauren in the fall,
Yeah,
and
in
see
fall and
how
sort
we
of
were
see
able
what
to
you're,
leverage it.
yeah, for sure, right, just
Yeah, and
because,
see the impact and feedback from kids in school.
because sometimes hearing from other voices other than just
I appreciate
voice voices can make a difference, right? So,
Yeah.
but thank you, just some thoughts I have. Anybody else? No? Okay, so move on then to our board report.
Yeah, we had, on the STEM committee, we had a presentation from, around the youth hub and youth liaison work. It was an update. And, you know, as everything happened during COVID, things kind of slowed down. So they're revitalizing, basically the youth hub program and of course tying it to our multi-year strategic plan. We currently have 6 hubs, secondary hubs, and they support over 160 students and 17 elementary and secondary schools. And they work through, basically, our youth workers will also work through and provide supports for students from grade 7 to 10, around effective transitioning and so forth. They are looking at expanding because we haven't won a hub in Pickering, so we are going to get a hub in Pickering, as well as looking how to support further provide supports of the elementary system. So it was a really great presentation, and we know how much value we get from this program, basically connections with parents, with community, and with students. And so if you do have a time to look at the report, if you look at one of the things that I particularly was impressed was around how referrals were made, and it's, you know, 26% are students self-referred or others, and that means that those students have trust and have knowledge, but have trust in the youth workers as well. So I thought that was a really it was a great presentation, and you know, kudos to our youth workers, liaison workers, and our community hubs, because they do some important work to ensure that students are successful in our schools. We also had basically our student trustees did their year-end presentation, and you know, every year it seems like our student trustees, you know, they just do phenomenal amount of work, and they've made some significant changes to ensure that students across the board have their voice being heard. So it was it's quite we'll miss the trustees, but I know we'll have some great student trustees, we always do, coming forward starting in September. And we also had our quarterly construction and update as well. And as Superintendent McCauley mentioned, there was basically a report on the gifted program, in which basically the process was stayed for this year, recognizing that we do as a goal have to look at how gifted programming is, not how it's offered, but how the process for nomination is, so as to ensure that it's not meets students' needs, but also ensures that it's free from biases and so forth. So, And then, of course, Tuesday, we had our finances, as mentioned, the finance, the core education funding was released. So we didn't get numbers per se, as far as, but, you know, again, we're looking at an increased enrollment, as far as students are concerned. So as you know, when it comes to funding, most of the funding is based on enrollment. So, you know, a lot of the increases that we see is really due to the enrollment increase, as well as, you know, contractual increases. And then a slight increases to benchmarks that not necessarily meet inflationary increases, right? But, so those are the majority of the things that we see, and I have read the technical paper. You know, the data, census data is being updated, but unfortunately, it's still, there are certain parts where they're looking, it's 2000 and, I forgot, 2000 and whatever, 12, and then to 2021, data, but then still in the prediction, 3/5 are, the prediction model is still based on 2006 data. So, you know, I don't understand why here they got to, you know, the newer year or, you know, the one before, whereas, you know, still some in the prediction model, we're still using 2006 data. So, you know, they are moving it along, but it's a 5-year process. And, you know, that's really good. They've also changed the Education Community Partnership Program, how they fund it's broken into 2 funds. But as far as that's concerned, and let's see. So basically, they're looking at, you know, really, they said, you know, at least every board has received a 2.5% top up sort of thing. And, you know, you're sitting there going, that does not meet the needs of as far as schools. We've already talked about, you know, the responsive education program allocations. There was another one that was listed in there, and I had asked at finance, but it was something to do with a pilot project, which I wasn't sure what it was about. But again, we know that those, which we used to call PPS. So, you know, I think they just change acronyms every time, and they change grants slightly just to confuse us. But again, we know they're really like one-time or short-term grants. We can't necessarily do anything that we know that we want to have sustainability with those, but we can improve some things. So, of course, our finance meeting is coming up, and agree with you, you know, 100% as far as, you know, having this information. It really does not allow us to do proper public consultation for the board, because, you know, we get it, and staff, again, it's released on a Friday, late, you know, afternoon, you know, as well. So it's frustrating that way.
You know, is that the inclusive block?
Yeah, something like, it was a pilot.
And it's a small amount. So, what it was coming into the current 24-25 year, extended for 25-26. So when the transition coordinators were here and speaking about 18 to 21, and we've talked about transition to work programs and work experience, that sits as an inclusive accommodation, individualized. And we know that our secondary schools run extensive cooperative education programs that we require a fairly high level of independence in the workplace and for the work work experience as well as the class. And so what the project grant really did was sat in the middle of that to say, what happens if we augment the supports to co-op and are able to bring more students that have accommodation needs into the mainstream, for lack of a better word, co-op program? And so we mobilized that through student success, and we're able to add an educational assistant in with the staffing of the central co-op teams in order to work with employers on accessibility and coach students who just needed that little bit of support to get between the classroom and independent in their work experience from a co-op perspective, but not yet needing the full scaffolding of work experience. So it's just bridging that middle and seeing what's happening. And so Monique Mueller, who was here with Kuldeep Chahal last month, they are the team leading that, and Michelle has been the lead connect in ISS, watching the data and what's happened to the students in terms of their attendance rate, the credit completion for co-op, and the pilot was quite successful. So we were really glad to see it extended for the 25-26 school year.
And just the last thing is that the board did pass a resolution around, I think previously, around, getting data around academic, success rates and credit accumulations. Basically for any student that partakes in ISF services. And so, to basically, again, to help us make decisions around this actions and strategic plan.
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions for Donna? With respect to the board report? Any? None? No, okay. Okay. All right then. Moving on to our consultation, creating safe and inclusive schools, but superintendent Monday and cross-section with the violence in schools working group.
Thank you. Lee Connor, do you want to share? And you can probably skip right through to the fourth slide. So thank you for allowing the opportunity for me to be here. I also have two other members of the working group are here as well tonight. So Don Edwards and Christine Thatcher are also involved in the working group. What the goal of tonight is to get some brainstorming. And so I'm going to give you a little bit about what there's the trustee ad hoc committee. And so they have specific purpose. So their purposes was to secure an understanding of the issue of violence in school across the district, to secure an understanding of structures in place to address the issues, and to secure an understanding of practices and undertakings to mitigate violence in school and the impact that these practices are having in schools. Very broad, very big. And so it's been a year and a half. And the first year we spent a lot of time trying to get the working group. So the working group is comprised of 11 members. So if you want to switch to the next slide. 4 trustees, 4 staff members, and 3 Federation Union representatives to try and take this large topic and figure out what could we do. So we engaged with a number of employee groups was our starting point to sort of bring them in and hear their voices. Last December, the trustee extended their timeline for their ad hoc committee for another year. So gave a bit more time for the working group to hopefully provide something that gives them something that they can maybe action or have some ideas to do from their level. As we had these meetings, we realized there's things that we heard that we think we could do also from a system level and also from a school level in terms of where some of the concerns were and what has been coming forward. We've also gathered a survey from those in the working group and from trustees, because we kept hearing that they were hearing from parents, they were hearing from, and our student trustees are hearing from students. So trying to get a bit more voice. We didn't get a great response, but the themes we did get aligned with the same themes that we've been hearing for the last year and a half, and the same themes that I think trustees and other people have been hearing from families and students. So those themes have included things like resources. So what supports do we have for supporting schools supporting students. We know sometimes it does relate, but I don't want you to think that we're combining violence with students with complex needs. Sometimes there's an overlap, not always. So we also talked a lot about bully prevention and intervention. We also talked about what does the learning environment look like to ensure that students feel welcome, belong, they feel they belong, feel safe. Progressive discipline came up because there's still a lot of misconceptions around what that is. And so then we also talked a lot about communication. What do parents and families understand or know? We think we've shared information. Has it actually got out to the right people? Do you know what I'm talking about when I say progressive discipline? So our next step was to create a report. So you can go to the next page here on the slide. And so the working group is in the process of finalizing a report that they will take to the ad hoc committee. The report's going to include some research review. So there is research out there. There's some involving universities, some that have been put forward by different union groups, and then some by the Human Rights Tribunal, not necessarily on violence, but related to experience for students in schools. We also want to summarize what we've heard. So what have we heard? And we also have the climate survey, which will be completed. It's just been finalized. They'll be working on the analysis. We will have it available as well. So we'll have some info around what we've heard about DDSB. But then we really want to focus on recommendations. Because if we only sit in gathering voice, we're not actually doing something that hopefully makes a change or an improvement. So that's where all of you come in. So part of that is ideas brainstorming. So we've gone to the Parent Involvement Committee. We went to Student Senate earlier tonight. We're here with you tonight. And then obviously the working group participated in this. And we may look, once we gather that info, we may consider some additional opportunities to gather more feedback, ideas, brainstorming. So we're looking a bit more at actions. And so I have a lot of sticky notes here that we can start, passing around, like a quick meeting start. And we want to look at it around 3 areas. So you end up having to get up and move around a little bit. And so, at that point you can decide, you might want to turn off the sound at that point with everyone milling around, but creating safe and inclusive schools. So from a governance perspective, so this is from the Board of Trustees. What advocacy are you thinking about that maybe they should think about? Is it ministry? Is it community? Or, right, what are things they could do? Is there any policies that they need to think about or review or consider? And then we always have another. Because is there something that we haven't thought about? And if you're not sure where to put it, and we'll work around if we think that your suggestion actually fits under it. Don't feel that you have to figure out for sure. But that's the thought here, is this is the Board of Trustees. System operations, that's more as across the district. So across the district, we write procedures. And so procedures tend to be the how-to of the policy. What do we need to know? What do we need to give direction on? What do we need consistency around? Those things. Professional learning. What do you think our staff or our students or our families need to know? I guess this one's more staff and students, but there is some system through PIP. They do professional learning for families as well. Communication. What do you think in terms of, we heard tonight, couldn't find information on the website, right? Is that part of the issue? How should we be communicating? How should information get out? What should we be sharing? And always another. And then school communities. So this is more at the school community level. What are some initiatives? Maybe you've heard of some. What are some things that you've heard that are great or new ideas? Again, what is some learning that maybe our students need, or our families need, or our staff in schools need? Is there communication? Is the issue, is there things here we can do system, but what can schools do? If you are a parent in the system, what would you like to know more about? If you're a community member, what would you like to know more about what happens in schools? And then we always have another. So actually just looking to give 10 minutes or so, if that works. I'm looking at you, Eva.
Yeah.
For people to get up, brainstorm, write some ideas on those sticky notes. I have extra pens here if anyone needs one. And help us brainstorm. So there's a chance to imagine. And so I invite you to do that.
Yeah, sure, that's probably a good idea. Does anybody have any questions with respect to sort of what this is, the exercise? Yeah.
Nancy, I do, just for clarity, I want to understand, so are we looking at this through the lens of violence in the schools? Or just inclusion in general?
So I think we have to think about it as, obviously, violence in schools is the name of the working group. As we started to do that work, we heard a lot about schools, when students feel included and welcome, then there's sometimes less issues.
Right.
When students feel included and they're properly supported and have all that they need to be successful, we may see less issues. So trying to be honest, to flip it from, because violence in schools is very difficult. Everyone has different viewpoints and thoughts in terms of what that means. And we spent 3 months probably trying to get a common understanding just with a group of 11 people. And so I think our goal is really, let's think about it from that positive side. And if there's things that may not align directly with this, but are good information for the board, we can still share that back. So feel free to take an opportunity to share.
I think then my follow-up question would be, are you deliberately not giving us a definition of violence in schools? Because in order to answer that, I feel like it would be easier for me to understand, are we talking student on student, student on teacher, what's the?
You're exactly right. And so we struggled with that. To be honest, when we started, there was a lot of conversation around student versus staff. But then it moved to student impacted by, or student experiencing bullying, or student experiencing conflict, because then we talked about what's bullying versus conflict. So you can see how broad it became. And that's why we kind of wanted to move toward that. Well, let's talk now about actions. Because if we stay in this perpetual discussion of what experiences are, which are still important, we're actually not doing anything.
Right.
And so this is to get us some maybe actionable items that then we can try, and then we can see, did it make a difference? But until we try something, we're kind of stuck. So if that kind of helps, it is vague on purpose.
Yeah. Is there any data you can share with us ahead of time about where you're seeing trends? Like, did you look at elementary versus secondary? Did you break that down? Can you share that with us? Like, cause it's like, I can recommend a lot of stuff about elementary, but if the bigger issues are happening in secondary and I haven't considered that, you know what I mean? Or if all the issues are happening in elementary and we spend all of our time sharing secondary strategies, it might not be very helpful.
So they were different. So we certainly heard from elementary that more of the concerns were that students who were dysregulated. Okay, and then we also heard about that conflict versus bullying. But we also heard the other side with secondary, where you have larger individuals and the dysregulation when it does happen may be less frequent, but can be more hard to manage. And then also student versus student at some of those higher grade levels. So yes, we did hear all of it, and that's why the committee itself had a really hard time trying to focus in terms of what area do we want to focus on? So we weren't able to get to an area. So that's why we've kind of now moved to this concept of, well, let's get some actions. And then maybe through those actions, we can get back to some focus to see if it made a difference. So we've been round and round. I don't know if Donna or Christine have anything to add, but
I was just gonna, certainly, we've had data before when it comes to our incidents database, right? Where the information collected, and, you know, it did show, a large number happening in the elementary as far as that was, because of dysregulation was a big issue, right? So, and you're absolutely right, you know, the definition of violence, you know, was wide ranging. So there was that, but, and that particular database really is talking more for, you know, students, student and staff. And that's where, you know, we have different, but definitely, we're looking broadly, at this to get, some recommendations moving
I'll
forward.
expand a little to what Donna said. When we spoke to administrators, school administrators, experienced administrators, we spoke about incidents in the school, student and student. When we heard from the union presidents, we of course heard about, you know, student and EAs, student and admin, student and teachers and so on. So adding that.
and also I think when we heard from trustees, we also heard more about the concern parents have around their student, how their student feels or
Yeah.
their impact at school. And then we were into that bullying versus conflict.
Yeah.
So it was very broad. So we're looking for broad ideas. If there's an area that, like you said, I can give some stuff toward elementary, or I feel confident that I can give some suggestions here, please do so. Because then we'll work through them, down the road, and we can also, take a few minutes to write some things up, but we can also leave this up for the end, and then Lisa can share those 3 charts. And if you think of something after, or you wanna send it in later, I'm happy to accept anything afterwards.
So you already got an extra pen.
Yes. I do. So I don't know if you want. Yeah.
schools. Thank you to the team for bringing that forward, and I hope there's some useful feedback that's on board there that you can bring back to your ad hoc meeting.
Yeah, we just wanted to say thank you because we can see there's lots of great ideas for us to start adding to the list we have. And really appreciate your time and thinking. And we will send that out. Feel free to send anything extra through Lisa. And if you have a brainwave this week, please send it in.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you so much, appreciate that. And then we are gonna move on to our next presenter, which is Justin Rimmer regarding leveraging AI for inclusivity.
Great, thank you. So as Connor loads up the presentation, just thank you for the invitation to come tonight to share this with all of you. So this presentation is similar to the one that was given at our IDEA conference, which was mentioned already tonight. So that was in collaboration with Grandview, which was fantastic. And I do have to give some shout outs to Sherry Stokes, who is part of our inclusive student services department, as well as Sean Maddock, who is from Grandview Kids as well. It was a great day. We had, I want to say, probably about 130 to 140 people there, searching across the system, including staff from Grandview. And so this is one of the presentations that I was invited to share, which is fantastic, around really the use of AI, specifically from an inclusivity lens. How are we seeing teachers potentially using this and educators moving forward? How can it be a tool for students as we move forward? There are lots and lots of questions. This is going to be a drop in the bucket, so it really just meant to be an overview for the committee as we go forward. But I'm hoping you're going to find some useful information. So as we move forward, exploring generative AI. So when I'm working with a large group and we're just dipping our toes into AI, I normally ask, on a daily basis, is this something you're using? Is it something you've heard of, you're absolutely terrified of, and you're just staying away from it? Or is this something that is integrated into your day-to-day life now? And so just to kind of help people frame, what are some of the things this can do? Something really easy is write a limerick, a haiku, a poem, some song lyrics, something about yourself. Put some descriptors in there and see what it comes up with. And so if we move to the next slide, I've got a prompt that I put in, create a limerick about a man who's passionate about digital technology and education. He spent a lot of time coaching his son's baseball team, loves to barbecue, smoke, and cook, and tries to find time to manicure his grass. Okay, so perhaps this might be me, okay? And so out comes this little limerick that is a techie who teaches with flair, coaches baseball with love and great care. He smokes meat with pride, keeps his lawn bona fide, while his grill sends sweet scents through the air, okay? And that was instant. And so you can kind of see how, from an education perspective, the speed in which you could create an easy hook to get students interested in whatever topic you're about to speak about. And I do find that if you are willing to sing something or rap something, even though they cringe, they are engaged and they remember. Okay? So that's a little bit about that. That's called generative AI. And we're going to dig into what that really means. But I think before we do that, I'd like to talk about UDL, which is Universal Design for Learning, really quickly, because that is really rooted in a lot of the things that we do, especially from an inclusivity lens. That really allows the majority of our students to be successful, regardless of any needs or challenges that they have. So if we move on, just to give a brief framework around what this is, it basically incorporates choice into the learning styles of all of our students. So it could be choice from a learning perspective, okay? So it could be, how are you gaining knowledge? It also could be choice based on how are you demonstrating that you've acquired that concept, okay? And the framework really is giving choice. Variability is the rule, not just the one-off, right? It shouldn't be, guess what, kids? This is day 100. I'm going to let you choose what you would like to do. Now, I'm going to give you the choice of how you're going to demonstrate it. It's about doing that all the time. It's about working towards something called firm goals, which really is just a learning goal. So being really specific with students, this is what I want you to learn today. And when they know that, it strips a lot of the confusion out as to all of those pre-assumed things that we walk in there with adults, right? Well, you should just know that I'm looking for this, or that I don't want you to do this, or I do want you to do this. It's being really explicit because students of all ages need that in order to be successful. And then we know that if these barriers are removed, then we do see increased success in students. So an example of a goal, okay, being really clear on that goal is, we're going on a trip downtown. How are we gonna get there? So I'm gonna open it up to the group. You can, and I do this all the time, really quickly, what are some ways you can get downtown? You can go ahead and show them.
Go train.
Go straight, that is always the number one. Okay, car,
Bicycle.
bike,
Not a good idea, but
well,
you could do it.
I got it.
And take the train.
Well, we can take the train.
I heard bus, I heard unicycle.
Did you hear both?
Oh, boat, fantastic, yes. Yeah. So we've got lots of different methods, but the goal is the same. The goal is to get there. Some of our students choose to crawl, but they still get there. And that's the point, right? Is that they have choice in that method. And so, but they do need to know what that end goal is as they're getting there. So that's a little bit about that. UDL really roots itself in making sure that what we're teaching kids is authentically relevant to them. It's reflective of them and relatable to them, right? And so that comes down to, what resources are you choosing? What stories do you choose to share with students? Keep in mind that we live in a world of 8-second YouTube shorts. So how are we going to relate to students in those ways, right? So that's just a little bit about what UDL is. Now, we're going to talk about generative AI in education. So where are we now? Where are we going? Okay. So I like to do this really quickly. So some of us in here are seasoned, okay, as educators, as people that have worked in the system for quite some time. And so you may remember a time when the computer came in to a school the very first time. Okay? And computers were actually created in the 1940s, okay, as part of a way of code breaking for the war effort. And then they came into our schools, I would say probably the late 80s is when you started to kind of see them pop in, okay? Internet, same thing, used in the military in the 1960s. It was a Cold War development. We only like in the late 90s did we start getting consistent access to the internet, right? And we could go on and on. Calculator came into play in the 1960s. It was in schools by the 70s. So we had all this time. We had 40 years, a decade here and there. Generative AI, ChatGPT, became live in 2022, and it was in our schools in 2022, let's be honest, because we had access to the internet. So it's about being responsive to these, I want to say, part changes to our society and the way we do things. Okay. If we look at what this is, AI, and just, I think it's important to just frame what this is. Okay, we're talking about generative AI. AI itself has been around for a long time. AI is spell check. I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. Like, that is a form of AI. It's not responsive to you. It's just like, I don't recognize that. I'm going to tell you that, and I'm going to suggest it. Okay, social media algorithms. Those are all the first forms of AI that were around. But now generative AI is when we are creating something out of these large language models. It's like we're having a conversation with a person, even though there's no person behind it, okay? So as we move on, a lot of this is generated from the internet. Literally take a snapshot of the internet. They did say 2022, it's a little bit, if you get the newer models, there's more information that's in there, but it's gathering all of that information up and then putting it into this model. And so as we go through AI generated content, we did start with those large language models. All of the pictures you see on your screen right now, those are all AI generated as well. There's a video there. Connor, if you want to click on that quickly, it will show you just some of the things that are on here. This is not real at all. This is fully AI generated. has, okay? So with all of this power, as we always like to say, comes great responsibility, okay? And so we do have a set of guidelines that have been released to DDSB staff around the use of AI, okay? And so those are available to our staff members. Here, all right. Key messages in that document that you will find there, okay? So, and really, this is really good information for all of us. This is not just a staff thing. This is, how do we all make sure we are safe when we're interacting online with these AI models? I'm going to say that under no circumstances should you put personal information in. And that would be your information, that would be student information, assessment data. These are the things that we tell our staff members. You have to be really, really careful with that. Because you probably heard in the news that, you know, a lot of the time when you're putting information in these, we are helping train these models. These are models that are trying to get better. There's huge competition within them, okay? We already know of like 4 or 5 giant companies. Copilot is Microsoft, Gemini is Google, ChatGPT is OpenAI, Grok is Elon Musk's version of it. There's lots, okay? There's lots that are out there. We have to be really careful as to what we're doing with that information because we don't want that to be an issue later on. Staff and educators and students really should only be using approved tools. Now we're working on that approval process right now, but we want to make sure they're using tools that we know that are safe. There's a lot of bias and discrimination within AI. You have to remember, it's fueled by the internet. So think about what's on the internet. It's not filtering things. It's literally taking everything and pulling it in. So we have to be careful of that. Intellectual property infringement. A lot of people want to get things done really quickly. And so, especially within education, we want to be careful as to what are we putting in there. Is it a paid resource that you want summarized and you just dump that paid resource in there? Now does AI have access to that? So these are the questions. And then really being careful and critically thinking about what you see. There is a thing called, and this is a real thing, AI hallucination. And if you've ever interacted with AI, it is a little too eager to please sometimes. It always says, certainly I can do that for you. Let me give you that information right now. And as soon as you say, oh, that's not what I'm looking for. Could you give me this answer instead? It's like, my apologies. I must not have known what you were looking for. Yes, I will just completely change my mind based on the next prompt that you put in there. You have to really be careful. Where is it getting that information from? Okay, so there's another video in here. I love these Wired YouTube videos. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole with this, but I do suggest if you have some time to look at this. So this is a professor from AI, so I took 2 little short pieces. This one is about bias in AI, so Connor, you can go ahead and play that one.
Learned from the internet. Every bias across the internet is somewhere represented in AI. It's learning from you. It's learning from me. It's learning from everybody. Also remember, every book, every blog post ever written on flat earth theory is in there somewhere. Take it with a grain of salt. At AI and Design asks.
Okay, so that is I love that, right? So when you take things that you know shouldn't be there, it's still part of the model. So you have to be aware of that as you're using it. The next image that's on here, this was from a piece of software that we were looking at using, and it's to create social stories for students. So from a spec ed lens, when we're looking at that, you're in here and you create this. This is the image that is generated. So I think we can see some of the issues from an inclusivity lens, from an equity lens, of what is created, right? And luckily, we're all trained to critically think. I'm very confident that a teacher would not then go and just throw this out in their classroom, right? Because we would note the issues and bias that are in here, okay? So where is this going for education? What does this mean for education? So again, I'll go to my friend in the video to kind of explain this one part.
About well-intended calls for educators to teach their students AI literacy. Are we AI literate ourselves? Do we know what AI literacy involves? Who will teach us? It's important to read books. I suggest you read books. It's also important to get a vague sense of how these things work. Most people are never going to understand the inner mechanics of it. Just like you don't understand how your car works, but you still drive it. You got to think about AI as being your expert friend who knows a lot, but has some bad misconceptions. So you don't trust everything. If I were you, I would use it a lot and trust it very little. K0 Crop asks,
I like that quote. Use AI a lot, but trust it very little. There's just some great information on there, but we know that we have to critically think about that information. And knowing how it works doesn't mean you need to know that you're gonna work. Right? So as we go through and we use this, we have some recommendations for really everybody as they're using AI. Always ask for more than what you're looking for, okay? So a really easy thing, if you are looking for 2 gardening tips, okay, for a flower bed that's in the back, you take a picture, you upload it. If you only ask for 2, you're only gonna get 2. Ask for 15, and then pick your 2 favorite from that point, right? Always ask for more than what you're looking for. We say the same to educators, okay? If you're looking for 4 ideas for centers that center around inclusivity, you know the needs in your classroom, you're looking to plan for that, don't ask for 4, ask for 20, and then pick the 4 best that work for you and your students, because you know your students best. The follow-up, the tweaking, use the knowledge you know in the classroom in terms of universal design for learning. Don't put personal information in. And then again, for all of us in here, if you're looking to avoid AI hallucination, you can ask for it to use citations and relevant and solid resources. If you put that in your prompt, you've kind of got the gotcha where it's like, okay, fine, I won't just make something up. I'll see if I can find some more information for you. So that's going to help. Throughout the rest of the presentation, this was a chance where I worked with educators as to where within our inclusive student services lens and in your teaching practice, what are some things that you can use AI for to streamline, to improve your practice? So we've got workflow ideas in here. One of them even being AI is smart enough where you can take a picture, upload it, and say, how can I better arrange my seating in this class to increase accessibility for some of my students while opening up collaborative spaces and having a quiet space? It will go, look at it, and give you recommendations. It's like a fantastic teaching partner that you didn't know you had with you. In terms of instruction, again, you saw the lyric example that I did before, but there are so many things. Planning documents, okay? For my own kids, okay? Who both have some special needs, I actually will sit there and generate some process documents with them, help with chunking, all of that. It's so easy now with this and faster that it enables our students to learn perhaps in ways that they didn't have access to learning before. And then in terms of assessment, personalizing some feedback, coming up with checklists, rubrics, just things that monotonous tasks that need to be done, but that can be done quicker so that we can reallocate time to doing things that are more important, which is actually speaking and working with students and addressing their needs. So that's where we hope we see this going. For students, this is not we're not taking a mentality where this is like the calculator, shut it down. They'll never learn again if they know this exists, right? We're in a world where this is being integrated into so many professions now. And so, what are we using this for? And there's a list here, but I'll share a quick story. The other day I was talking to my youngest son, who is 13, and he said 2 things. Dad, I can't use AI to cheat, because if I do, they're gonna know I cheated right away. It doesn't sound like me at all. Even if I ask it to be more like a grade 8 student, they're gonna know it's not me. And I'm like, thank you, because your teacher knows you, right? And knows your voice and what you're capable of. And so that really helps. And then he said, but I did use it to help study for a test. I had it recite some of the facts for me. It was a history test that was coming up. And I had to create some sample questions, and I did really well because of that. So it helps students create exam flow. So this is a tool at our disposal. And again, we have to use it responsibly, but there is great productivity and power that we have there. So thank you for allowing me to share.
Does anybody have any questions for Jeff? Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you for letting my nerd out. So obviously the biggest one is, are we also looking at how we can detect the use for plagiarism and those sorts of things? I know like back when it first came out, there was like a student, I think it was at MIT, that actually wrote a program that said, if you funnel whatever this is through, I can tell you whether or not it was generated through like.
Yeah, it's
through AI.
fantastic question. So we have tested several, we have talked to other post-secondary institutions, we have looked at the research, no AI checker works. And the issue is that everything that's created from AI is novel, it's something that's never been created before. So there is no way with certainty. Generally, those AI checkers use AI hallucination to give you an answer. And so that becomes problematic. The other piece that we have an issue with those checkers is the intellectual property rights. So you are taking, let's say you're in high school and you're in grade 12 and you write this dynamite paper, and the teacher's like, I'm just gonna check for a second, I can take this paper, upload it into this AI checker, which now you are training the model with that student information without their permission, right? It's now got this style of writing as part of this programming. So our recommendation is they just don't work. Leaning back toward knowing your students, evaluating process over product, having that full assessment cycle. So not just the product, are we observing what the students know in class? Are we talking to the students to see what they know in the class? It's that holistic view of assessment that we need to move towards, and that is consistent with colleges and universities across the system.
Can I just add, Jeff, as part of the guidelines, what we've added in is the concept of explicitly teaching your students when it's okay to use it and when it's not. So we're actually, as part of the guideline, we're rolling out lessons for teachers that they can use in the classroom with students to say like, it's almost like a rating scale. You can use it in this way, you can use it here, but not here, and these are the in-between ways you can use it. So that they really, and how to reference, that's one of the lessons that we're promoting. So it's really about not spending all our time trying to see if kids are cheating or not, but spending our time teaching them how to use it in a reliable and effective way so that it can assist with the work, but not replace the learning for them. So it's, once we have those lessons, then it's
Yeah, fantastic question though. Thank you.
Helen?
This was great. I don't really have a question, but I had a comment, and I was thinking about how we talk about some of the creative things that we can do. But when it comes to human skills, it's also AI, using the AI system is really great for enhancing our actual skills, like in creative thinking. Because I think a lot of what I've heard around the educator space is the fear of our students losing their critical thinking because they're dependent on, putting in something and generating. But I've seen a lot of abilities to even enhance that and enhance even just how we communicate. So there's ways to actually use AI to give us, take the ideas and enhance them even more. So it's almost forcing us to use our human skills better. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I'll just add on to that, I actually do use AI-ish regularly on my job. But the one that I've been finding super useful for me right now is I have been starting to do presentations for C-suite level executives. That was not in my wheelhouse. I am a nerd. I go detail, I go deep. How does one bring that up into that? So we actually have, at work, we actually have a proprietary version of that keeps all this stuff. I say, this is the information I'm trying to, this executive summarize this for me, 3 to 4 slides, Bam, it was fantastic. It was a really great way for me to learn a different way of communicating. It was all of my information that I just started with. It just helped me organize it in a way that I was not necessarily used to thinking. And so for me, I found that very, very helpful in terms of me learning another way of thinking. I did not get to create the information for me. So, but it was really cool that way. The other way, which we all talk about, is take a picture of your fridge and what am I making? No, it's fantastic. You can pull up a bunch of ingredients and go, what can I make with this? And then it will actually tell you
oh, if you've got a lemon, then you can also do this, or, you know, yeah.
So what part of AI is that, the chat, what is
You
that?
just, you take a
The
photo, you just upload it to ChatGPT or whatever your favorite AI tool is and go, what can I make for
Yeah,
different?
there's an
reasons?
upload feature
Yeah.
where you can take a picture and upload it.
Yeah.
Yes, I think the bottom line is the inclusivity pieces, like you're already talking about breaking down barriers where we may have strengths and needs in different ways that we communicate, just like a lot of our students do. And the fact that we now have this tool that's gonna break down a lot of those barriers to help all students be successful is amazing. But, to Lauren's point, we can't slide this on the rug. Oh, okay, we're gonna pretend this doesn't happen, and then we're just gonna go on our daily lives. Life finds a way. That's the Jurassic Park thing, right? They're going to figure it out, so we might as well teach the safe, responsible use.
Right, I got a question, actually. Yeah, okay, in my head. So, for the inclusive team, so in terms of when we talk about individualized learning and there are maybe students that learn at different levels, even say for maybe even reading programs or whatever, but as educators, you're also learning what the AI can do. So how would it look like in terms of creating a plan for use, in other words, to enhance a specific learning object? So like if it was trying to help a student maybe organize their work better, or maybe for comprehension, like how would that look like in terms of, they have the device, but how would they be guided to use the AI or something?
So for example, and these are pieces of training that Lauren just explained that we're gonna be working with educators on. But to give you an example, let's say I'm teaching a specific math concept, okay? And I have my, vague lesson plan kind of there, ready to go. But I know that I have certain needs in my classroom, and that's the human component, right? I know my students, so I know the needs that they have. I can upload that existing lesson and ask, hey, I have students that have self-regulation needs in the classroom, and they also need time to get up, stretch, and do that. I find that they're more successful to do that. How can you modify my lessons so that it includes that? And it will just tell you exactly.
Also speaks to the prompt.
Yeah.
So I know it's something we glanced over a little bit, but it's actually something where there's a lot of work being there
That
around
is a skill.
what is the correct prompt and how do you develop that ability to be able to create that good prompt around there as well. And that's gonna be something that people will have to learn, because
Right,
it is something where you remember back to Jeff's meat smoking poem. But it comes down to the information that was fed into it to actually frame what was happening with it as well, which is, again, we've heard different things around that's maybe too much, or it's gonna give this. There's no difference from when you set a frame on when you would be doing that particular activity. It's happening like this. And then you can look at what the process is going to be and how it's actually going to be created. And instead of it being the frame of, well, let's figure out what it is and how we're going to look at this. The frame is still the frame on how we're doing it, just replacing it somewhere different. And that sometimes feels worrisome for people in this end, but it's about how do you create a good frame of what you're trying to have something.
And your student question, it would be something very similar. The student's overwhelmed by all the things that are on their calendar. Take a picture of the calendar, upload the calendar, and say, can you break this down? And this is where we have to train students on how to prompt, right? How can you break this down? These are my needs. I need to be able to see this on a hourly schedule, on a daily schedule, a day on a different page, so we're not overwhelmed, and it will do it for you.
And also being very cautious around what private information
Correct.
is being there and what information is being uploaded. So again, it goes down to what information are we actually framing and what is that conversation taking place as well.
Thank you. I just want to comment back that, because when we talked about choice in the learning, I think that's really important, because a lot of times when it comes, especially for kids with executive functioning issues, a lot of times you have a lot of models and images of things that is created for them. And then when it comes back, it didn't work. You had the calendar, but then, oh, I forgot to do this, I forgot to do that, because it wasn't really something that they saw and chose for themselves. So that, I think that would be really helpful.
Go ahead, Alice.
I'm just wondering if that guideline booklet is available yet. I don't see it online. Is it going to be uploaded on?
It's internally facing currently, but we can do a shoulder check and circulate it to SEAC.
Thank you.
I think it would be great to have it available to parents and families.
That is the intention in the rollout as well as guides. It literally got released to the system last week. So usually what we do is we release documentation internal to the district so that staff and educators have time to review it so that they're ready to respond to family inquiries when things go public.
There's also a family and parent event planned for November. That more information will be coming on the PAA, where kids can come with their families and do some sessions and some learning around that as well.
It's gonna take to it like. That's
Yeah, we're anticipating a lot of people.
They're gonna throw it up like sponges and their parents are gonna be like, what is this magic? Yes.
The kids know and never get going.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anybody else with any other questions? I just wanted to say like a comment. The one thing I think with ChatGPT that's kind of interesting is it can help somebody who has the ideas and thoughts, but are struggling to find a way to put on paper or how to frame it. And I would say, like, you know, when I draft letters and stuff now, the way I draft a letter is something that I learned working with a particular lawyer at my office who gave me the opportunity to draft stuff for her, and she would revise what I drafted. And eventually, I learned her style. Like, I learned how to phrase things and stuff. My writing improved as a result. And I remember the day she just signed the letter that I wrote. She read it and signed it. I was like, okay, like, just a feeling of empowerment. And then you sort of go forward to thinking about English as a second language and that, and for some students or people in the workplace, right? Where they know what they want to say, but they may struggle to put those words, you know, out there in English because English isn't their first language and they're learning it. And they can use this technology to get their thoughts out and make that leap and sort of help them along with that job. So there's a huge component of accessibility, I think, that goes along with it, as well as the ability to learn to write better and not actually need AI to improve something, right? So that's just my 2 cents. Yeah. So, okay, thank you very much, Jeff. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you coming out. That's a great presentation.
I love, sorry, go
No,
ahead.
I was gonna say like, cause I think there's still an AI fear, so I was gonna ask like, how do you do it? Like, how do you respond to that? Because there's still like when I first started presented in one of our OPSA presentations, some of the like teacher staff were like, this is like doomsday, this sounds like a scary thing, like what are you gonna, like, it still has that impact, so how do you respond to that? Like, how do you?
You have to, if you understand how AI actually works, I think that helps reduce those fears. AI is all probability. So all it's doing is it's looking at a vast database. It looks at natural language and it goes, what's the probability that you're looking at for this word? Okay, and then the next highest probability is this word. And it just starts putting those words together as this is coming up. Contrary to what people think, there's not actual thinking that's happening as it goes through. It is a very complex mathematical model based on the information it already has. I think that we have to look at that, and then we have to look at all the other tools that have come up through the ages where we thought, well, that one's new today.
Yeah,
And that one's next day.
no one's gonna do that.
Yeah, no one's ever gonna,
Yeah.
what are you gonna do? Walk into a store with a calculator in your hand and actually do the math? Yes, yes, we do that now. We've got these, so that's what we
Walking
do.
around with a computer.
Now we have a full computer, right? So I get the initial fear.
Yeah, the exercise is actually, so Jeff had done an abbreviated version. We've done many different versions of this, with
Yeah.
different teams, with different groups. I had the pleasure of working with, one of Jeff's counterparts, Debbie Sansford, as well, and working with Lauren, Amanda, and then looking at training senior team as well, and training all of our senior managers and system leaders as well around this. And we used a very similar deck. We've used different versions, but it's always the activities that we do. So tonight was not really embedded with activities, but the prompts at the beginning are usually, you do this now. Now here's what we're gonna have you do it within. Now you go and try it. And everybody else is doing it, so you have to go and do the thing during the workshop, and then you start to become a little bit more comfortable, and it gets over that initial just, well, what to do, yeah.
We have, training built in, so there's an August PA day, all staff will have an AI training session with their school leaders in August. That'll have, set some of that foundation as well. I think the key, when we think about the role of AI, and we think about the needs of our students, you don't want a situation where you have AI and teachers actively using AI and allowing students to use the AI in this classroom, and right next door they're not, right? Because there's inequities there. So what's really, really important is that we do the training so that staff understand the value, but obviously it has to be used responsibly and ethically. And that's the training we're really focusing on, improving AI literacy to know how we can embed that into the learning for students, in a way that doesn't take away from the learning.
Any comment? Anybody else? Anybody else? Right, thank you very much.
No, I remember that.
Sorry.
Just before you finish lunch, right?
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I would love to see how implementation comes back. And that sort of thing that we could bring, I would love to see how it's going.
And that is the direction of our director too, is that a year from now, the metric on use, how it's going, and so sharing that back with SEAC would make.
Learning
sense.
would be great, especially around our lenses and that kind of stuff.
Anybody else? Oh, I'm done.
I'm done. Sorry.
I'm so sorry.
Should I just leave?
Just run it.
Sorry, I can't answer that.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming out and sharing with us tonight. That was a great presentation. Thank you. All right, so we are going to move on then to the business arising from the minutes. The first item is special education placement, which Andrew can speak to.
So I thank Donna for doing a beautiful lead into it, in terms of what went before, our board of trustees. So, as a senior team and department team, we recognize the importance of IPRC and individual consideration, and recognize the, false path of random selection in terms of that. And so we remain committed to, as Donna said, examining the program and processes and supports for students, which will be part of the fall plan and consultation with SEAC in that regard. But at this time, we have mobilized 3 additional classes, so 3 of the 6 host sites. All of the students in 3 of the areas were accommodated within the original plan for the classes. And at the other 3 sites, an additional class was required. So from a financial perspective, which was not the driver for the visit in the first place, but the implication thereof of the correction is 3.6 teachers, the movement of 3 portables, and the addition of transportation for the program. The facilitator for the program has rolled those offers out to anyone that was part of qualifying for the program as of March 25th, which was the initial random selection date, and those letters have gone out.
Anybody have any questions? Thank you very much for looking at that again, and I look forward to further future consultations, because I think, right, there are some things that we legitimately need to look at and going forward, but process is important, so. Okay, thank you for that. Next item is a SEAC parent caregiver survey, response rate to date.
So through you, I have that as well. So in connection with our research analytics team, as of last night at 4 p.m., there were 272 responses from families. That is lower than 2 years ago at this time. And so hope it's okay with SEAC. Lisa and I went ahead and mobilized another push out, an email direct send to families this afternoon with an appreciation for the 272 families, who have responded to the survey and a request and encouragement for other families to do so. In order to do that, we have extended the survey by a few days, so that we're not sending a reminder and then closing the survey. So that additional send is going, and then the survey will close a week tomorrow, so June 13th, just to give that additional time because the data 2 years ago was so rich and so valuable, important shaping action items. We want to make sure that families have that time to provide that input.
Was there not one done last year?
It's biannual.
Okay, any other questions with respect to that? Okay, yeah, from my perspective, I think that's great to send a second percent. The more information, more responses we get, the better.
So Lauren will bring you the results of the survey during the September meeting first, and then you'll be able to plan between then and set your actions for October.
Okay, sounds good, thank you. Third item is the draft letter that was circulated yesterday to the ministry. Did anybody get a chance to read this ahead of the time, and sort of provide feedback? You've got feedback, yeah? Yeah, just,
Really grateful that you did this, so thank you for that. I think
Thank you.
we're all feeling a little frustrated and
yeah,
so thank you for taking that on.
thank you. Yeah, it's really frustrating because for some of us who've been around the table for quite some time, we remember when we got to actually see a budget. And I mean, that's where you can provide real meaningful feedback, right? My question was, in here was about, we haven't received it before May since 2018, right? In 2018, the election happened after, we got the technical paper in 2018, and then there was an election.
In your business and finance team, because they track the specific dates
Okay.
over here.
If you could let me know that, because
There's 1 year that's sitting, I think is an anomaly to that, and I just want to make sure that we are accurate. in
and
the
I would
dates.
like to add that in there too.
It was like almost but one, that's. true.
Yeah.
I just want to check the dates.
And when we
There
were
is one day that I just can't remember.
I can't remember which year.
But it came in March, we were just like,
There was one.
yeah.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that we're accurate. I will
Yeah.
check with Jen Machen.
Okay, yeah, if you
Yeah.
could get the dates sort of year over year, because I don't recall having since 2018 actually being able to give a actual like presentation on a budget. Right?
Connor thinks it was 2022 because of role transitions. It stands out, but we'll double check.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
okay.
just know.
Because I mean, even this year, it may as well have been June for as late in May as it was, right? Like, it's not gonna go, probably be passed until July, this point.
No, we were still, there's no open deadline for school boards. We are still required to pass budgets by the end of June, basically by July 1st. So there is no, and they have not done that. And so the only other comment I was going to say is that we might reference the, policy on, parent communication office, and I've lost the name because it specifically talks about, you know, consultation and everything else like that. You might want to reference his own words in his own policy. And that was.
Want to send me that?
I'll send you the link. I know, I've got it linked somewhere else, but
Okay.
So within that process, locally for us as a district, our final scheduled board meeting for the year was scheduled for June 16th, and there has been a special board scheduled for June 23rd with the budget as a standing item because the time was too much of a crunch for both leadership tables in order for the collaboration and discussion and decision to follow before the 16th.
Right.
yeah, but also from a, you know, still thought to ensure that we, as much as we could, to provide that opportunity for public consultation. But I mean, as I said, it's still very, very tight.
Oh, yes, sorry, I just remember today, when it comes to questions about budgets, you can still ask questions even in we have one board meeting, so that's an option as well, like, it doesn't have to be at the fine, because it passed already, so they can still ongoing ask questions through the system. before we do the final budget, so that's an opportunity. We just had the draft presentation, as Donna mentioned, but there's still opportunity for anyone in the community to ask. Which is good, to get some things clarified.
Yeah, this presentation, like if you watch the education finance meeting from the other night, it has basically this presentation is part of that. And it gives you sort of it just gives you an overview of sort of what the model changes are and whatever, but I tried to summarize them earlier, but it gives you that, it's in that,
And through, we can chat with the, business finance, if they're okay with that, PowerPoint being circulated, so yeah.
Okay.
Cause it was on the screen and.
it was.
So I don't anticipate a challenge, I just don't like to circulate other people's work without their consent.
That's fair.
So because the deck went up on screen for the live stream, I don't foresee an issue, but I don't like to speak to other people for being shared without their consent.
That's why I said it's available through the,
Yeah.
if you watch it, it's available there, so.
Okay. I know that there's some feedback. There is not, obviously, the budget, the technical paper is out. It is what it is for this year. I'd like to take the revisions back and bring this back in September for SEAC to review again before we send it. I don't think we want to just rush out a letter. I just want to make sure that I'm able to incorporate and that SEAC gets another chance to look at the final draft with policy being added and that as well. So if there's any further feedback anybody else has on this and you don't have it ready like now, feel free through Lisa to send that to me and I will happily incorporate it and send it through for September too.
There's no word to see it, it's one time.
No, that's exactly it. So, but it is something that I think is important to get the ministry. Yeah.
This might not be this is for that, like what I'm gonna add, but I just, following from trustee Edwards' point about, comments on the, what did you say, sorry, I lost my thought. He said the point on the ministry regarding.
Parent communications and the involvement, yeah.
Right, but I was just thinking about, because we did kind of briefly discuss a bit of the human rights piece, and I don't know how appropriate it would be fitting, but just because if, like, I think as much value to what we're saying, because I think that's maybe our next steps of maybe addressing it from that. I know we talked about maybe writing a letter to the Ontario Human Rights Commission, so that's why I'm just maybe we could put something in there that similar to what Donna's point was in terms of parents and, but just something from the human rights that backs up some of our points, maybe. This is a thought. I don't know if anybody around the room thinks.
Okay. Okay, so if I could get the dates, if you're able to get your hands on the dates, that would be great. And anybody who has anything written down you want to hand me, I'll take it back with me and do a draft, and then Kelly, I may reach out to you on possible wording with that for the human rights aspect of it.
Yeah, I just thought it might be good to add, if you're talking about the fulsome constructive way for the consultation, I just sort of saying, the reason why we care, and I said, a robust and healthy consultation process enables and facilitates transparency, collaboration, and builds trust between school boards, government, and the communities that we serve.
Yeah,
There's a reason why we want earlier data, because we want that good stuff that comes out of it.
And that's what's quoted in his communications policy.
Is that what's quoted?
Yeah, so like.
I
words
just
like
think
that.
I just swear to God, I just.
Yeah. But there is a whole thing, and there's a bunch of stuff, so yeah, so there's a couple of documents I can send you links to.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, sorry, can I just go back to my point? I want to remove that, if I had a little side discussion, just kind of clarifying in terms of the context and the writing to the minister, but I think what was shared just now kind of supplements the letter versus, writing in a different angle.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we can use
I
the language that's already there from.
Already there,
Yeah.
okay. I think basically too, we wanna sort of made the point clear, like what it is we're asking for, like basically. You need to give the technical paper in March, like. You know, if you're following the pack on SEAC, timetable, we should be able to be reviewing a draft budget in April. Like, it's just, it makes sense, right? So,
For a couple people that are new around the table, Pac-On SEAC is a provincial advisory association for parent committees. And there is a draft schedule of suggested topics, across the year. Laura and I spoke about it this afternoon.
Yeah.
In the 25-26 is not yet published, so, but we talked about how, when we reference it, some of the things are 1 month out of sync, but it's a really good pattern for consultation from SEACs to districts in terms of, advising on actions, support.
Right.
yeah, go ahead, Carl.
I don't know, I'm still learning, is there like an is there a collective of all the SEACs where there's kind of like a opportunity to hear feedback from other SEACs around the problem?
I think we had one,
That'd
at
be
the
really
provincial thing,
That
back
was
in
a
my
training.
first job.
Yeah.
SEAC, you and I went down to that, and that was like 10 years ago.
Yeah, they had their very first, community session for SEAC members, and they said it was about, it was about 10 years ago. And that's the last time we've ever seen it, as the only provincial organization that they have is there's, the Ministry Advisory Council of Special Education, which is, basically appointed members. You actually apply to get appointed members. I failed. I applied and I failed one time. Anyways, and they appoint, as far as the government appoints those, and it's kind of interesting in that, for the longest time, it operated in secrecy, because a lot of times when it came to their minutes could not go out, until after they met, and they only meet so many times a year. Representatives that went there were told that it's all in camera, basically, you can't repeat anything. So we never really knew, and the minutes were very vague. So that's been part of the issue around that operates, and how the various people that represent the different exceptionalities or groups or associations, how they get feedback is really up to them. There's no consistency across the thing. So I honestly know when it comes to intellectual disabilities, there's several organizations there that could report, but I know as a local association with community living or whatever, we were never contacted by any of those. So there's no surveys, there's no nothing to gather that information. So it's needs to say there's one recommendation somewhere around there that keep on mentioning that, standards, the education standards, development standards, that are sitting there and it isn't being done. Actually it just came to my mind the other day, maybe Durham needs to start taking the leadership and maybe setting something up for even off the Falls and Central East, getting SEACs together, right? Something like that, to get those doing, to get information, to start collaborating, because that's the only way, because it's not happening.
Yeah.
If there is any interest.
Sorry. Oh, yeah. Allison, and then Censor.
Oh, okay, I was just going to say that I think with each of our associations, at least with mine, we meet monthly, the people in our SEACs across the province. And we share within our organizations what's going on, but SEAC to SEAC, yeah, that would be great if we could take that lead to make that happen. Sorry,
Great minds think alike.
Oh, you're
Since
gonna say the same.
Autism Ontario restructured, we do meet monthly and with all our SEACs. So we get a little bit of insight into what are the major concerns.
Okay, so I will have a second draft of that letter in September, for us to all look at. All right, if there's any more questions or concerns, we'll move on to the next item. Okay, association reports or committee reports. Does anybody have? Burnett.
Lisa, I just sent you a document if you can distribute it for me. I'm just gonna hit 3 main points. We have, the Reach for the Stars David B. Award. Nominations are going out. He was a man that dedicated himself to volunteering and was greatly important in his life. As well as Autism Ontario. On the document that I shared, there's links for workshops that are directly related to strategies. I saw a lot related to sensory, related to sensory integration and using it in daily routines. But there's also a workshop, self-directed workshop, it looks like, on funding applications. How to register for OESP is on this one, so.
Good enough. Anybody else? Any other, yeah, Jen?
So I represented SEAC at the last parental committee meeting, and Heather was there also, and it was a duplicate today, but that was fine. So we collaborated and gave them information similar to what's on the board there. And we had a guest speaker. Her name's Jean Clinton. It was very, very interesting. She spoke about the brains and the brains of teenagers and how we need to be connecting with the teenagers from a place of connection. And also an important point that she made, that the brain actually doesn't stop going until they're like 21 years old. And it's a key point in our parenting styles, because if we do have authoritative parenting styles, it will not be connecting with the kids. And she spoke about social media bullying. It was a very, very, very good presentation. Also, they had the survey going out and they asked for feedback. So what I wrote on the feedback is like on their newsletter, which comes out quarterly, that I would like them to give SEAC a space to present what our trending topics are. So at least parents are more aware of what's happening in SEAC, because I think that parents are not really aware of what we really do here. So hopefully they will entertain that thought. And that's it for me.
That's awesome. Anybody have any questions with respect to that? Any other association or committee reports? No, moving on then, to correspondence, which there was none. So we could jump right into 14 community concerns. Are there any communities, yeah, Shauna?
I have a couple, kind of concerns, I guess I just want to ask about. So the first one, I guess, is more of a concern. There seems to be with some, the families who have spoken to me recently, like this, there's a lot of optics of, like secrecy with the board around the special education classes. And like how many there are, where they're located. I don't find that information like easily findable online. And I feel like there's a lot of like angry families because they feel like things aren't being communicated clearly. And I'm just curious if there's a reason for why it's not out there, because I feel like it would solve a lot of conflict with certain families if the information was just more readily available about like where these programs are located, how many there are, how many students can be in each type of class. And I think more clear language about what types of students each class actually serves. Because I think some of the families I've talked to, you know, who have kids like in grade 1 or grade 2, and they're being told, oh, you don't want to put your kid in this class because they won't be able to get a high school diploma if they're in this class. And it's like, why are kids in grade 1 being like, why are parents like have this fear mongering about like, you don't want to set your kid up? And it's like, I don't think that's actually accurate. I think if the kids' needs end up being met, they can move to a different type of class that better suits their needs. And a lot of just kind of loaded language about like, well, this class teaches your kid how to do their laundry. And I'm like, again, why are primary students, why are parents getting that message? Because 100%, I bet there's classes that focus on life skills, but I don't think talking about doing laundry is a life skill that's applicable to grade 1, 2, and 3 students, whereas communication and self-regulation, I think of that type of language is, and I just wonder if, like, because I've looked at the document that breaks down the classes, and I find, and I'm a teacher, and I find it very confusing about like, well, these sound very similar, these sound like different types of students, like different types of classes for mostly autistic students. Which ones go into which classes, it's very unclear, so I'm just kind of curious, you know.
Tree. I think there's a lot of important questions in your feedback. So one was that feedback from the trustees was also around the number of classes by class type. So that will be in the plan when it goes forward to board. As a board, we have generally not published number and location. We are quite transparent about the number of special education classes in total and the number of teachers through the budget process. It's declared, it's its own line within the budget book. The reason we don't publish the locations is for the privacy of students within those classes and the vulnerability. So as a team, if we were to publish the location of special education programs, it can produce a vulnerability in terms of where the kids are and the locations. And some districts that used to publish have withdrawn their publishing for that reason. It's not to hide where they are. We're very proud of our programs and the supports and the work with families. The other aspect is in conversation with families, we move our classes based on the students accessing, and I think when we brought the information about that standard in the special education forward in March, the team gave an overview that we generally locate the classes on a 3 to 5 year trajectory that will move a class within the district if the students accessing are more from that side of Whitby than that side of Whitby, or that area of Oshawa and that area of Oshawa. So we'll relocate so that kids have proximity based on access. It's in the conversation and planning with families that sometimes if the location is in front of the individualization and what the homeschool can do or consideration of special education class, then families move into communities saying that that class is there, so I'm gonna move in because in 4 years, then I'm hoping that my child accesses that class. And the class may not be there based on the evidence and the kids accessing. So absolutely hear the need in terms of the transparency of the number and what type, broken down by elementary and secondary as well, because a few of the class types exist in one panel but not the other. For example, the transition to work program only exists in secondary because it serves students who are 18 plus. And so that table will be in it. As a board, we do hold that we will not be publishing the district list. It's a very similar conversation that we don't publish our school floor plans from a safety risk perspective. That the benefit and risk of publishing, here's all the addresses of the programs, doesn't weigh out in students' favor. It's nothing about privacy of how many, and for us as staff, it's about the students and the families in terms of that. In 2019, so, and some districts have gone in different places. You have everything from Blue Water and Limestone. Blue Water has closed out all their special education programs. Limestone has closed out all their elementary and maintained a secondary panel. Our neighbors, both to the east and west of us, maintain really thorough special education placement menus. We remain committed to that as a district. We're quite proud of developmental through practical learning, through the various programs. In 2019, through a special education review that had very extensive community consultation with families, student voice input sessions where we went right to the students and asked, what's meeting your needs, what's the gap, and then staff. It was very clearly indicated at that time that building special education class types based on diagnoses or exceptionality didn't hit the mark in terms of students. So all of our special education classes at that time were rewritten from an outcomes perspective. So that's where conversations around practical learning is based on literacy, numeracy, life skills. And I completely hear you on, we have some conversations to do with our staff in terms of what examples are brought forward in a developmentally appropriate way for students that don't place the conversation 10 or 12 years down the road, but place it more in the immediacy in terms of what the student's working on and where developmentally and what the family's working on in their pathways. When a student enters a separate and different pathway, there is impact to potential pathway implications. So if we are recommending a review, for instance, of a student within the primary division into the developmental program, which is wraparound medical life skills support, that pathway does not end with an OSSD. A student's not going to move from a developmental program and sit in a 12U chemistry class and be graduating with an OSSD. And so sometimes, and I completely hear you, we did a lot of thinking on the feedback from last month in terms of that consultation feedback, particularly around the early years and families that have come through an extensive medical pathway in terms of early years, and we've done a lot of conversation around that. I think the hard work that families do primarily, that's their heart and soul walking around or rolling around in the world, and we never lose sight of that. And the hard work our teams do, because they do. I've seen ISS staff and school staff in tears over decisions of trying to struggle with what's right in the now, next, and later. You have an administrator sitting across the table who that is an experience of how do I wrestle with getting you what's right in this moment, but building your independence for later. And so sometimes those conversations are really challenging because, like for example, we'll have families that go, can we please have a third year in kindergarten because the first 2 years went really, really well and we just want to hold on to that a bit longer. And we've both sat at tables and said, but you really don't want to get a year out of secondary because you don't want to be asking our secondary colleagues to do in 6 years what they can magically do in 7 to get to an adult pathway. A 5-year-old's parent doesn't want to hear that and doesn't have the space if their challenge, if their struggle is how do I get through the next 3 weeks? We have an obligation professionally. There's a decision out of DDSB that says, yes, parent preference and parent informed. There is a professional practice, expectation, responsibility, and accountability that comes with setting some of those and positioning those in the conversation. So I think it's never a 1-2. It's always got to be, what are all the factors that come into it? But what I really hear from you is the kindness and gentleness and proximity of the conversation to where the family's experience is. And our teams always, and it's, I wouldn't say struggle, I would say it's a complex challenge to position the breadth of information that goes into those kind of considerations and options to families, while also trying not to overwhelm and honoring that our 7-hour day with students that we're privileged to have sits within the 24-hour day for families. And so how does that, and I think that's the beauty, the complexity, the heaviness, the opportunity of how all of those things collide. Because at the end of the day, you have a whole bunch of adults making a decision for sometimes a really tiny little one that we know what we know at the moment of time. And so we try and keep as many options open. We're a district that, like as a senior team, we see the graduation schedules for secondaries. We also see the concluding ceremonies because we see those as, so when we see the diploma, the certificate, and the certificate of achievement, those are all equally valued, worked for. And some paths, not every step in a pathway leads to all 3 of those options being open. So sometimes heading into a special education class, does it close a door on an OSSD? It does, and saying otherwise would be incorrect to the pathway data for our kids. Is it possible? Yes. But is it possible with before 21? Not likely if we go in early and move off of grade curriculum and move away from the Ontario curriculum into a fully alt. If you move into a fully alternate program in primary, you're not coming back over to an Ontario curriculum achievement in second. There's a dissonance there that's not going, and so that's hard. As parents are, everybody wants great things for their kids and they want as many pathways and open as possible, so do we. So we often have conversations of what pathway keeps the greatest number of choices, options, independence in interests for the family and the child open. And so sometimes that dissonance of why not a special education class early is actually because we're fighting to keep the doors open later, but that the conversation can't live in that space yet because it would completely overwhelm. So I hear you on the trend, I hear you that we can be clear on it being outcomes based. We will not be a board that says, here are the diagnoses that go into practical learning and here, because it's not about the label, it's
No,
about
it's
what is the goal for the
yeah.
child, the need,
Yeah,
the strengths.
but I think
leverage
just like
the strengths.
describing those needs more
Yeah.
clearly for families, so that they have an idea, especially when they walk away from a 10-minute IPRC meeting.
Fair,
And
and that's
they
never
aren't
how it
from
should
an
be.
education background, and then they go and they're like, okay, what did we talk about?
Fair, and the
And
options.
they can't really see that difference on paper.
That's fair.
That is really confusing.
That's fair. And the option should, if we're making the decision between regular class and a special education placement class, the IPRC should never be the first, second, or third conversation about that. It should be in the care conferences, wrapped in about the goals, what are the considerations, what are the options? The IPRC should consolidate the decision, not be where the options are presented.
I think there's a big disconnect in the primary ages between, especially kids who have really high needs, kids who are non-speaking, kids who have toileting needs in kindergarten, going into grade 1 where there is no ECE. And the fact that the board can't make a commitment about EA support then pushes a lot of parents to want a small class placement. Because when you have a kid who can't come home and tell you if they sat in a dirty diaper for 8 hours because there was no EA coming in to check on them that day, that is really scary for parents. And I think right now there's a really big disconnect at that age group. And I wonder what can the board do to kind of address
Very
that?
fair. No, very fair feedback, thank you.
My second question, is just about EAs, because I've heard from a few people, and I'm curious, that they've had EAs that, you know, they can check in with at the end of the day and they talk to them about their kid's day, and then they have some that just say, you need to talk to the teacher about that. And I'm curious, is that like a local union issue with EAs in this board, or is that direction from the board to the EAs saying direct it back to the teachers? Because there's no communication coming from the board to families about whether or not they're allowed to talk to EAs, and then they feel kind of like brushed off. And again, like just leads into that like weird secrecy, and it's like, if they shouldn't be talking to EAs, there should be like some messaging about that so parents understand and have like clear expectations.
Thank you for that. I'll start it and then turn it to Connor, because he leads allocation and communication and PD for educational assistants. All the elementary ones are in training tomorrow with us outside. So I think one is there should always be able to be a relationship and a connection between the school team and the home team. Period, full stop. You want that circle of care to be connected with each other and to know each other in that way. Then beside that, there are distinct responsibilities based on employee groups. And so if it's a question around programming decision and strategies and decision, REAs, they are amazing. They're the ones that know blue paper, not yellow, because of the reflection, or that TV show was so last week, we're on to this now, or different things like that. They bring a developmental understanding, they have vast backgrounds. To not minimize that, but declare based on role descriptions, the teacher, the Ontario Qualified Teachers, OCT member, the BEd that's in the class is responsible for program design and implementation. So if it's a check-in on how's it going, I think that's different than, can we just talk about the goals and that should be directed back to the teacher, because that's where the responsibility sits for design and assessment of the program. So I think it depends on what the question is. I think also too, and I mean, we've all been in schools in the last 24 hours, we've all been out in schools literally in the last 24 hours. It also depends on the responsibilities of that staff member. They may actually have kids waiting for them inside. And sometimes it's easier at a gate in a crowd of parents to say, please talk to the teacher, then I can't talk. Like, sometimes the please talk to the teacher is the safe exit for dignity of the child and the situation, but it could be our educational assistants, the permanent EAs work 7 hours a day. Most of them are on a bus one end of the day or another. At least a third of the educational assistants in the district are supervising on buses. And so sometimes that parent communication at the fence or the gate with our wee ones, it's role delineation, one, depending on what type of information is being asked for. And two, it could be because they have other responsibilities. And some of those responsibilities could be in the school. And for some of our other education assistants, we know that a high percentage of educational assistants in education actually work second employment. And so they may have ridden a bus to school, they're supporting kids through the day, they have dismissal duties, they need to be somewhere else in half an hour because they have another 4-hour shift in a related field serving kids. So sometimes that please talk to the educator is the quickest kind
Yeah,
of
it's a protection.
transition.
Sometimes, again, I know EAs, they care a whole ton, just like all our educators, they care a ton for the students. And just as Andrea said, they could sometimes walk down into fields like they're deprioritizing their student for something else. So sometimes that is a protection, but it also comes into, as Andrea kind of said, as well, is that the delineation on what is the purpose of the conversation, boiling it down to kind of like what is really being discussed versus the pickup at the bus door or at the gate. Hey, how was last night? How's everything? Great, going great. I heard about baseball. Did that go really well? Because that may feed into the programming or what was happening for something else in there, you know, or it's about, hey, did you watch the Jays last night? Sorry, baseball's on the break. But it's all those things that may actually feed into what's going to be happening that particular day and what that is, because we know we've been using our incentive system of Blue Jay stickers, right, in terms of what's been going that way, versus the, hey, I need to talk about this particular thing in this particular aspect. That should be directed into the person who's actually in charge of that particular design of that particular aspect. So, yeah, I think it isn't a can't, won't, anything there. It's just more of knowing the circumstance, knowing the scope, and knowing how it's actually going to be. And I think that is exactly that. Sometimes it's a quick way of trying to show we still show a whole lot of care, but I don't want to say I have to get with that bus, or I need to do this, or I need to go find this job, because then it feels like it to the students.
And then I think at the core of your question is, what information is the family missing
Yeah,
that we need to get at in another way? So, because the question is going to be very authentic and it's going to be an information need on behalf of the family.
yeah,
So how do we connect to make sure there's a process? Because as you said, some of our kids can enter through their home and go, this is what I did today. Every parent should have access to, what did my child do at school today? What excited them? What worried them? What brought them joy? What are they learning? What could they do today that they might not have done yesterday? So to me, it's going back to outside of that moment in the yard and figuring out a communication plan that gets that information home. Because at the core of what you asked is a parent or caregiver that just wants to know how their little person's doing at school.
And
I think all families want that. And I think that's always something that can be improved, but I think especially for the families who have their kid in a small class placement, who have kids with communication needs, who can't go home and tell their mom and dad what they did that day, that's really scary for parents. And some of those parents, like there was a communication plan from the classes. And I feel like especially in the small, I feel like in all the classes, but especially in the small classes, there should be some sort of daily communication and it's not happening.
I think it comes down to, like, his first statement, in the sense of communication should be a partnership.
Yeah.
So, like, that's what it needs to be, in that sense. So oftentimes when I'm speaking to families and schools, or sitting at tables and lots of different partners, to me, it comes down to, the question I always ask is, what is the communication plan that's going to work for everybody here? Right, just because it may work for one side to say, hey, it's actually here on this particular thing, or the communication log. If it's something that can't necessarily be accessed or read, or something like that, or there's in time to be updated on one side or the other, it can be a two-way partnership in that sense. So it's an important thing for everybody to say, hey, this works for me. Okay, let's find the way that it does it, because again, communication partnership is just that, full stop.
I think it would be helpful just for the EAs as well, if there was something from the board that went out to families that said, hey, there's an EA in your class, this is what they can talk to you about, and this is what we should direct the questions. Sorry, my language isn't coming out well right now. These are the things that you should talk to the teacher about. These are the things you can talk to the EA about, time permitting in the school day. I think that would just set everybody's expectations really clearly.
So I can just sort of piggyback on that as well. The piece that, because I actually experienced that as well, I had to advocate in some cases to get a communication plan. And I think one of the things that I'm really big on is that I hear, and I absolutely 100% understand everything that you're saying. What I see and what I hear and what I have experienced is that depending upon the staff at the time that year with that, the execution of that is not equitable. I had to fight for a daily communication from a teacher one year, and then the other time it was just handed to me. So the consistency across the board, like even in the same school, in the same class, just the next year over, was a different experience for me. And I have to, I think I'm a relatively strong advocate for my child. I cannot even imagine parents coming into the system, don't speak English, or are not used to doing that. We should be offering a standard option, and like Patrick, that should be one of the initial, how do we talk to each other? How is that communication? What do you want to see that's gonna work? I absolutely get it. Like if your child is in a classroom of 30 kids, does the teacher have enough time to write everything that happened to all 30 students every day on top of everything else that they've got home? Not necessarily, but so what is that plan that will actually get something concrete going? But it should be proactively done, not at the request because somebody will. And I think that's the piece that's always bothered me, is that there's not enough consistency across the system for that.
I feel like, especially when we just did a whole presentation about technology, with the technology we have now, which is a lot different than when I started teaching, like 13 or 14 years ago. I feel like the board can easily say, this is the expectation for basic communication in a regular class for regular students, like an update about what you're learning once a week, once a month, like pick an expectation and say, this is the bare minimum. Because in some classes, there's no communication at all. There's no communication in kindergarten classes. And it's like, how can that be? How can any, like, no 4-year-old is coming home and knowing what they did in a day to tell their parents? How is it that some kids get more communication from their preschool than they are getting from their kindergarten class? And that's just in regular classes. And then when you get to classes that only have 6 to 10 kids in it, how is there not a basic expectation? And I feel like it's easy to say, yes, we should prioritize this and blah, 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 but there's so many things for teachers to manage that eventually something gets dropped. And I think if the board says, this is the basic expectation, and they publish it for families to know this is the basic expectation, we have that transparency again. It makes me really sad when I have families calling me and saying, am I expecting too much? to hear once a week, once a month, to know, well, what's going on with my kid, and they feel bad, but they have to ask the classroom teacher, and everybody doesn't want to upset the person who's helping their kid all day. I don't think anybody should feel bad about wanting information about their kid, so I think there should just be that basic expectation.
So just a point of order, we have to go around the table kind of with hands up, because I know there's a couple other people who want to speak, Kelly and Allison. And being mindful of the time.
I think there was already a lot of reflection, so I don't have much to say, but I just wanted to respond back to the points that in terms of from a lens of looking at things as a prescription, I do see the value in allowing for that natural organic interaction with staffs, a parent to a staff, as well as that we're a parent that advocating, right? Because there are times where even in the field when I worked in ABA, you have communication logs and they never got read by whoever was taking the caregiver, and maybe they're busy, different reasons, whatever, but that was maybe generated because the staff said this is the way, but that might have not been the model that suited the parent. So that's just a view that I think that is a process of bullying, but I do appreciate the feedback, because even as trustees, wherever we talk about communication, we try to support that. So it's not, I don't see it more as a set thing to prescribe, but to discuss how are the ways that we can continuously improve the ways that we communicate information between parents and the caregivers, I mean, parents and staff. So that's, yeah.
And just to point out, this actually ties in very well with the survey results that are coming out, right? So we have to remember that. Allison, and then Donna.
I'll be very quick. I just wanted to underscore what Shauna said with respect to EAs and transparency. It's really, really hard to be told, and this happened to me last week, I can't tell you anything about what to expect until September in terms of EA support. And I said, well, could you just give me a range? So I'm talking about a nonverbal child who needs toileting and feeding support and is not mobile. Nothing. I said, like, just a range, like, could it be, he would get an hour twice a day, that he'd be getting EA shared with 5 other kids, nothing. And I was given absolutely nothing. And that, when there's a vacuum of information, fear sets in. And so I've already started thinking, well, what will my backup plan be if in September I find out he gets somebody for 20 minutes a day? And there's the potential that he'll sit in the diaper all day, or that he'll come home and no one has fed him and his little lunchbox will be untouched. So just if principals could just be given some advice to say something, some broad range of EA support that might be available, because fear absolutely sets in, as Sean said. And that's for those of us, as Tara said, who speak English as a first language and know how to navigate the system. And I was filled with terror at the complete unwillingness to give any sense of what support might be available. That's it.
One of it's actually PPM is, and we do have in it, but it has gone back for revision as well. It's policy program memorandum 170, which is basically school board communication with parents. And there is a suggested standard. It says a standard around all this stuff. And we do have a protocol, we have a policy, but I know it went back for feedback and it hasn't come back. And one of the standards in there, as far as communications, it talks about that, basically parents inquiry should be responded within basically 3 days. And if you know that it's going to be longer than 3 days, then you must at least acknowledge that this is and give a time expected. So that's that whole communication protocol. We do have a policy, but I know it's being revamped because this is the expectation under PPM 170. So that's one of the ones, and it talks about transparency and everything else like that. And this is what they expect of school board. So they should be expecting this of themselves, but that's another story. As far as that, but there is that whole thing. So a standard,
Yeah. Okay, anything else? Moving on then to celebrations and successes, and I'm gonna start, because I think it's, this is a big one. I wanted, on behalf of SEAC as well, and our superintendent had to leave, so she wanted to make sure you understood her feelings, but I wanted to thank you very much for the time and dedication that you've given to this table over the years and to students. I've worked alongside you when you sat in Connor's position, and we worked very collaboratively, I can't even speak right now, over the years, and we've done a lot of great things for kids in this room. And so I wanted to very much thank you for that. I do remember when you got the superintendent position, I was like, yes, because I knew your dedication from when you sat in Connor's chair. And I know the names of all of those positions have changed over the years, but we've done a lot of great stuff, and I know that we've learned a lot from you around this table as well.
Likewise.
Yeah, so thank you very much, and good luck in your new position.
Thanks.
So. And at the same time, I'd like to welcome Lauren, because I've heard nothing but positive stuff. And I know that the work that we have had around this table will continue under your leadership as well. So knowing that you guys work collaboratively together over years, I have absolutely no doubt. So that makes me very happy.
I have to say this too, because I think I've been around this table the longest, and I know Andrea as far as quite, even as a role as when I was a parent sitting around this table, right? You know, you brought leadership to this table, you brought change, the positive change to special education around this table, to our students, particularly in the care shows as far as what you have done. And I only know that, I know you're switching roles, but the thing is that, you know, as far as switching roles, I know that that same care and everything else is going to be done on the whole integrated patient side as well. And your knowledge, and it only enhances the ability of what's going to move forward. So I know you're not disappearing, but definitely, you know, we've been, and, you know, we've only worked with Lauren for a very short period of time as far as she's been Ajax's FOS, family of schools, and she shows the same care and whatever. So I think we're, you know, we're in good hands.
You're in great hands.
I'll say on that too, that for me, with all the other special things that were already said, I want to say that one of the great experiences I had was your modeling, the way you modeled affirming others. And your model, sorry, I don't get emotional. You, but anyway, onions in the room. But yes, the how you modeled what true care is, and your ability to lead from a place of connection and valuing all the voices in the room. Every time you come to this space, you do that intentionally. So thank you.
And I'll add one thing for Censor Neb that I know she would want, and I remember her saying, she sat around this table, that when she first joined SEAC, the support and encouragement that you gave her to join in and to share her thoughts and to share her feelings and to bring that out meant everything. And she felt that even before, when she sat at the table with some parents in previous years, where you would reach out and say, did you get what you needed, right? And did you feel heard? So it meant a lot. She wanted to make sure that you knew that, and she had to go. So
Very kind.
yeah. So
I think this table is one of the best learning experiences for staff. Learned a lot. It impacted my leadership as a school leader, and certainly centrally, and as Donna said, it's who I am in terms of inclusion and accessibility. And so to take over a portfolio that's being baked into based on Georgette and Lauren leading it, and to leave inclusive student services with the leadership team that's in the department and Lauren, I'm looking forward to seeing what I didn't see and what I didn't get to collaboratively with the team, and where the team will go and take great things for kids. It's exciting.
yeah.
I'm gonna keep it brief because I'm gonna start graduating. It has been an absolute privilege to sit at this table with you in all of your roles. And I have learned a ridiculous amount of just the knowledge that you bring and the joy and the care that you so demonstrably show every month. Oh my gosh, what's happening? Can we turn off the video? So that Dennis, this is gonna be ridiculous. A whole bunch of crying people at the end of them. It has been an incredible journey. I am absolutely blessed to know you as a person as well, and I do consider you a friend too. And I really do hope that you do keep in touch with all of us because we will miss you very, very much around this table. I know, I will have to send you Adam's work. But I will say this, we got you.
Oh, we got
And so we will continue to run forward and continue on in the journey and support these kids that are still very important to us, so.
Grateful for the time at the table and looking forward to seeing it continue to thrive for kids and families. So thank you to all of you for the time.
Thank you. Anybody else want to follow that?
I read my piece and, you know, I wanted to sort of interrupt some of the chairs around the table. I have to mention these three things as far as, you know, as far as success is concerned. Last night I attended the graduation post for Black Student Celebration, and again, a very successful one as far as seeing our basically our students who basically were supported by their coaches to achieve, and some of the powerful statements that talked about learning their purpose and continuing on to learn their purpose. It was so inspirational to sit there and listen to those things. So it was a really powerful event. And then, and again, you know, the type of leadership that some of our students, we're graduating as far as some of the students are concerned, because our student trustee, Kayla Hoare, won basically the scholarship, the Ontario Public School Student Leadership Award, and because she was the driving force around the DDSB Senate Future Leader Empowerment Conference. So these are the types of students that we do generate, and because of staff, and so I think that's really important to celebrate. And then the last thing I did is, and again, this comes back to Durham. I attended an accessibility fair at the town of Ajax, and a prior student, Anthony Lee, was the key speaker. And I don't know if people know who this individual, but he basically in 2009, he was a promising track athlete. And in 2009, he suffered basically a workplace incident where he became paralyzed from the waist down. And he told his journey and all the things and some of the supportive things that has happened to him. And just the whole thing about support. So how important, you know, support was, and key individuals that even though basically he wasn't in school anymore, key individuals who still supported him from the DDSB as far as that's been. So it was a really great thing. So those were really great things to see that things happen for our kids.
Anybody else?
Great story.
Oh, yeah?
He's graduating great this year. My God, my child in a suit. That was the most surreal experience I have yet encountered.
Your child in the suit.
Put my child in a suit.
Excellent. Oh, that's sweet. I'll add to that, going to my daughter's university graduation next week, so that'd be exciting, so, yeah, Great. Anybody else? Okay, next SEAC meeting, September 4th, 2025, right here. Motion to adjourn. Donna, seconders, Karen, all in favor? Thank you, everybody. Have a great summer.
You got great.